let's jump straight into it then, because before we knew all of this was going to happen, you had worked on an album.
Yeah.
You had planned a tour. You had looking forward to playing and bringing the music to the people. So how has this affected you in both your personal life and your kind of creative band life?
Yeah, in the sort of creative band life side of things, it's been pretty, in a strange way, it's been kind of okay. We're like in a very fortunate position that we kind of have a label. We have a studio here in Cardiff as well. So like we've got access to everything that we need to. And like, for example, it's a studio just owned by us. So if there's any situation where I wanted to go there and work, I could do that, which was great. But personally as well and creatively, like it's kind of been pretty good. I think because my job, I'm a producer anyway. So I think to other producers in Cardiff and stuff, everybody was kind of like, well, this is what we kind of did anyway. We just kind of just sat in a dark room, just like mixing songs like all week. Do you know what I mean? So I never really got to see anyone anyway. So if anything, it was quite nice because I brought all my stuff home. So I was working and writing and mixing from home and stuff. And it was nice. Got to see my girlfriend way more because we were just both got to spend some quality time together, which was really cool. And then sort of after the first week of being a bit funked out by everything and trying to write songs and trying to find a million ways not to mention global pandemic in songwriting, do you know what I mean? I just felt like everybody at this time, all songwriters would be like, you know, writing like really in-depth, like compassionate songs about human spirit and love and being together and unionism and all that. But after that, it was really good and it was really fruitful. And I think there's, you know, we've walked away with lots and lots of work that we can work with. But in terms of the release of everything, we were, again, just really fortunate that everything that we had done had already been done. So it was just a case of just putting it out. So we've been really lucky. I mean, I'm sure there's loads of people out there who are not as lucky at all. So, so counting our blessings in that case, I think.
And in terms of... the existence of the band and not being able to play live, is that affecting you? Is that a worry?
Yeah. I think that's the only one that really, really bummed me out. It's like I think we were supposed to go to like South by Southwest like a week.
Right.
It was just like man, the fate of it all was brutal because I mean we were getting geared up. I think we had already pulled out of like a festival in Zurich because we were like, okay, if we go to Switzerland, then we might not be let into the States, so let's not go so we can get into the States. And then like we didn't go, that festival went ahead and we were like watching all like, you know, like classically as anybody does, it's just like sat at home, like in your pants, like sweating, watching Instagram the festival being like, man, I could be there right now. And then, but it's okay, but we're going to be going to Texas and we never got to go. So that was really hard. And I think it was hard making kind of like the mental adjustment from playing live to having to engage with fans in a different way, because I think a lot of musicians were kind of like kicking and screaming and being like, no, I don't want to do a live stream. You know what I mean? So it was hard to make that adjustment, but now everyone's kind of adjusted. Everyone's I think the most important thing is everyone's being realistic about when they can play again. So everyone's saying like, next year, let's just do it next year, which is really good. So I think there's a more positive kind of outlook. The only thing that's troubling me at the moment here is that in places like Manchester, like yesterday in Manchester, there was announced that like 2 venues are closing down. There's like really support, you know, there's no support for creative industries at the moment, which is really troubling. And usually in these circumstances, in ordinary circumstances, there'd be an opportunity for musicians, creatives, whoever, to sort of band together to sort of support these institutions. But because we can't play live, there's no support there. It sort of makes you realise that the support that has always been there for these venues is the ability for the venues to be able to do their jobs. Do you know what I mean? As soon as you strip that away, the government just doesn't really care about them, which is a really sad kind of reality to acknowledge. You know?
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting to see how that turns out, because I think it's maybe not as bad yet over here, but it's a similar thing where the most of those organizations, they function on volunteers and stuff, and they don't have a lot of money to begin with. So it's going to be interesting. Hopefully everything will go all right, but it's definitely going to be interesting. Unfortunately, I'm a kind of a pessimist in that instance. It's just that I think
the government bailed out bankers in 2008. I can't envision a circumstance in which they'd be bailing out music venues before.
I know.
Yeah,
it's a strange. I've become quite a cynical bastard.
Yeah, if there's one good thing that can come from this whole thing, is that we're all like united in our cynicism, and hopefully have the communist revolution that we deserve. Right?
Exactly. Well, let's talk about more happy things then, which is obviously the album that you finished before all this took place. But I'd like to jump back a little bit further, just to the beginning, for a quick minute, because I believe you're from quite a musical family. When did music grab you?
It was weird. So like my dad had always played in bands when he was younger. My mother not so much. My mum was like she loved Dido, and that was pretty much exclusive. She just loved, like, her whole world revolved around Dido. Okay. And my dad was in band, which is not a bad thing, by the way. That's a fantastic thing. So I just had the thought of my mother watching this and then being like, "Hey, I like more than Dido." So it was nice. And then my dad had played in bands, so he'd always played drums. And I think the first time, like, I got this like slip from school that was like, "Do you want to play?" Like, can you imagine it written in that kind of like 90s kind of like word art thing? Like, "Do you want to play an instrument?" And took it home to my dad, and my dad was basically like, "You should play the drums." And I was like, okay. And then sort of started doing that, and it just really excited me. So I think that was kind of like the first time. I think it was playing music before actually listening or hearing anything. Okay. It was really exciting because it was like, especially with drums, I think drums is like just like the best instrument for anybody to start playing because it's so visceral and like physical and like connecting. So like you can feel yourself actually like creating this fucking thunderous noise that has such like a deep resonance with people. So that was really good. And then from there, I think when I was old enough, I think my dad just started taking me to shows. Like, I think the first show was like a Linkin Park show in Cardiff. And it was, again, it's like every experience I had at that age, it was like the first shows that I was going to, just seemed really visceral and profound. Like I was like seeing God or something. Do you know what I mean? That's the closest experience I've had to have a religious experience. And that's kind of just what kind of drove me to try and replicate that sort of live. Do you know what I mean? Is that every time when I was like 5 or 6 and learning the drums, and my dad going to take me to see Linkin Park or Green Day. Do you know what I mean? All these like, you know, classically embarrassing bands to love when you're a kid. Was just always just a really like a visceral and like religious experience. So I think it was that. But yeah, I don't think there was any really one moment. I think the drums. I think playing drums was pretty important. I remember being in my first lesson and just like I think my teacher was really cool as well.
Do you still play?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. Yeah. I still play. Yeah. Of course. I didn't start playing guitar till I was like 16. I was like, exclusively. And yeah, like my teacher like had like, because I was in primary school, so I was probably like 5 or 6. Do you know what I mean? He had long hair. To like kind of slump into work late every day, you know, get booze and stuff, and it was like, "Oh, this guy's cool. I want to get." I mean, even being like 6 years old, just being like, "There's something so alluring about this kind of lifestyle." So no, it was really cool. So I think,
that's really interesting because, well, a couple of things, but kind of romanticizing that idea of playing music and seeing these things. Once you started to live that life, did it kind of live up to the expectation? You know?
Yeah, there's a couple things that dropped away. I think that you kind of like, as I was growing up, kind of realizing that a lot of the people who were playing music, although they were fantastic musicians and stuff, they were kind of like really deeply unsatisfied with what they were creating and like the way that their life was going and that sort of thing. And that was something that sort of ran through kind of being a musician and the life of a musician, is that, and it was an important thing to learn, is that you're often met with constant disappointment, which I think is kind of available in all creative industries. Like if you're an artist or a filmmaker or whatever, it's just like you've kind of it is like I think like music and creative industries are profoundly religious in the sense that you commit yourself to this idea, even though it's a little bit ridiculous in practical and like, you know, real terms, to be like, you are going to work like the worst job. You're going to work in like in a shitty cafe that you don't even care about for 6 years of your life because on a Friday night you want to go up and prance around on a stage. You know what I mean? It just seems like that, you know, and if you said that to anyone, you know, who was of age, anyone who had grown up and had you know, an ounce of sense to them, they'd be like, no, that's ridiculous. I'll just go get a real job and have a comfortable life. Do you know what the hell are you talking about? But it's that sense of religious experience that you have when you're younger that just like carries through that. So I think it's the main thing that kind of like kicked me off course and was like, okay, lots of people are really struggling to deal with this idea of creativity and how to practically implement like their creativity in real terms. So hopefully we're getting some way to doing that. But you know, I think it's just an illness. I think I'll never be satisfied with anything.
No, but is that in a sense why you were attracted to the music of the 70s, early 70s? Because I heard you say something about this, that what you particularly enjoy in that music was a certain sense of honesty or a certain sense.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And I think like for me, it was like that. The music of that time was like, because it was post 60s. In the 60s, everyone was kind of like anything is possible. Do you know what I mean? And
sure.
The 70s was kind of like the Hangover, right? Where everybody was kind of like, ah, fuck, like it didn't change anything. Like really, come on, like what can we do? So it was really good in that way. Like I think that's why I love it so much, is because it's honest with that disappointment. Which a lot of I hate splitting music up into decades, but the 80s. Yeah. Like back on it, like the 80s was like cocaine, so it's just like
exactly.
Everyone was like, everything's possible again. We have fucking cocaine, and so I really like this, especially American 70s music. It's just like with this situation, you know, contextually, it makes a lot of sense with like Vietnam and existential situation and all that sort of stuff. Every sort of American hopeful was suddenly being killed or had been killed. You know what I mean? It was just like everyone was kind of just like, fuck, man, this isn't the 60s anymore. Like shit is getting real. And I think that's apparent in like the literature of like in like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. There's like I remember like reading that and being like where Hunter S. Thompson's talking about where he was like looking out this hotel window and you can still see the watermark of where the 60s got up to and nothing has got past that. Do you know what I mean? Right. Yeah, it's that level of honesty and kind of darkness. And I think that has an effect on the portrayal of like sarcasm in music and all that sort of thing. I think it's just, I think it just, that decade added a lot more depth to songwriting as a whole, because everybody was ready to admit that it wasn't all fucking Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Do you know?
Fair enough. But so, obviously I have a song kind of named after it. But John Lennon was, I think, the first one that you kind of latched on to. And then was it after that people like Mark Bolan, or did that kind of happen at the same time?
Yeah, I think I got into Mark Bolan first. It was really weird. I was playing in a band. I was playing in like a doom metal.
Okay.
Like with a bunch of guys when I was like 16, 17, 18. Okay. And so we got in, like I got into like T-Rex then. It was like because a friend of mine, Grant Jones, who was the lead singer in the band, had sent me a copy of Dandy in the Underworld, which again is one of the latest, like one of the later T-Rex albums, and not necessarily one of the most famous ones. But I remember just thinking that was insane, just like because I think Tony Visconti and his work that he did on all those T-Rex albums is like just like the sounds are so powerful, it's crazy. But then I had always been a Beatles fan, but then kind of discovered the John Lennon solo stuff, and that's kind of really what had the most profound effect on me, because it put the T-Rex stuff into context a little bit as well, because obviously all the T-Rex stuff is all very fucking, you know, we're traveling through the stars and fine, and you know, wearing diamond boots and all that sort of stuff, and it's all kind of playful. But the John Lennon solo stuff, I think I listened to Plastic Ono Band, and it was just like the most honest and like brutal record I've heard in my life. I was like, wow, I just feel like John Lennon's actually speaking to me right now. Do you know what I mean? Which I never got with the Beatles. It was with the Beatles, they were always like hit makers, and it was always like, okay, you're writing songs to make records. Do you know what I mean? But that John Lennon one was just like, and all the John Lennon records after that were just like, I've had enough of making records for record's sake. Like, I'm going to speak to some people. And that's what really like had an effect on me, and sort of like influenced me to kind of shift the way I was writing songs, because I think at the time I was like writing songs like kind of anonymous love songs about like situations that I'd never been in and stuff I'd never experienced. They never had any real weight or anything like that. So it was like, it kind of gave me a bit of a shift to writing songs in my own voice and kind of like speaking to people in that way. Because I like inherently, I'm a very sarcastic person. So it's like, if you use that in songwriting, I think it's great. And I think, again, like you said, the honesty thing is just so pertinent. And I think people really have a stronger connection to the music more generally if you're being honest in what you're saying. Do you know what I mean? And even if that is being honest about the fact that you just love denim, then I think people get it, you know.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point, because as you write songs, then well, what was the first song that you'd written in this style that you felt comfortable with, or that you kind of felt, okay, now I'm finding who I am?
It was Double Denim Hop.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was like, it was prior to that, you know, and this is an interesting thing that I never really acknowledged within myself before this interview. So thank you very much. Is the combination of those two things, like the T-Rexian thing of like having fun with words and being playful, and then the John Lennon thing of being like really honest and being like vocal about your own opinions and stuff. Is that combining those two things? It was like, I remember I'd gone up to a trip I'd been up to see a friend in Scotland because I had like this kind of post-university apocalypse meltdown where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, like classically middle class.
I'm still in that. I'm 33 now. I'm still in that.
Yeah, I think I always will be. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
I don't know what I'm going to do. What does this mean? And I was like really, really feeding into my own soul a little too much, because I was like reading books about the economy and stuff like this. And I was like, what is the economy? What is, really becoming a true, like, an insufferable person. And a friend of mine was living in Scotland studying. So I was like, okay, I'll just take a trip up there and I'll go up there. I just had like the best weekend of my life. Just relaxed and everything was fine. And at the time I was wearing double denim, was trying that whole thing out. So then I came back and just like wrote the song and was just like, you know what, like I'm not going to be like so hard on myself to try and write like a song that is going to be perceived as this amazing, profound love song that has affected so many people. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, I'm just going to write a song about denim because I really enjoyed that. And it turns out, and then when that song came out in like 15 minutes, like it just like itself, which that's the best thing about songwriting is when that happens.
Right.
And then and connected with so many people afterwards, because it was just honest. You know what I mean? It was just like, it was like something that was entirely honest. So I think that was the first one. And then as soon as that happened, it was like opening floodgates. You know what I mean?
Right.
So suddenly everything coming pouring out, which was really good. And it's still my position today. Do you know what I mean? So that's a really important part, I think, of beginning writing or becoming an artist, is just like identifying whether because you don't have to be honest. Like there are plenty of people that aren't. Like I don't think that Ed Sheeran was like smoking cigarettes at 16 and like do you know what I mean, doing that whole thing that he mentioned in that one song or whatever.
Sure.
You don't have to do that, but as long as it feels honest within you, within yourself, that is your approach to songwriting, then I feel like it has a profound effect anyway. So I think that was a really important point for me, was being like, okay, this is the type of songwriter I am, which is for so many artists, creatives all over, to nail down their vibe essentially is like so I think that was the first point.
Well, it's an interesting point you raised, because you mentioned you can be quite sarcastic, and one of the things that I've maybe that I've realized about life, that's kind of sound. But it's not to take yourself too seriously, because what you mentioned is, if and I can imagine if I was a songwriter, I'd go, but I'd never be able to write something like Pink Floyd or whatever. I'd just get in my mind way too much. So
absolutely. Because I think, and that's why we've had this kind of like tropish approach to like rock in general, to be like, like if I genuinely believe that if you try and avoid being cliche and all these rock tropes, then in essence you make your performance way worse, because you're just trying to avoid, like you're because the only way you'd be able to avoid those cliches and tropes is by identifying that you like them. You like them in the first place, to be like,
Sure.
oh, this is really cool. But it's a bit fucking Spinal Tap, isn't it? So maybe let's not do it. And it's just like you're putting pressure on yourself not to become what you actually love. And so like it's absolutely fine in my estimation to watch School of Rock and just create a band just around that one idea. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So with all those things, the live show and the kicking up in the air and all that stuff.
Ooh, you froze.
70s fucking
yeah.
covers band. Do you know what I mean? But I think it's really important. Again, it's the honesty thing.
But then what I find interesting as well is, even though you have a lot of fun in the songs and it creates a certain atmosphere, there's also kind of poignant topics you touch upon, and
I'm glad they come across as poignant.
Well, at least to me, there are. I can't speak for anybody else, but for instance, I wrote down a couple lines, so maybe we can see
Absolutely,
what we think of them. But in Hollywood actors, show everybody else how much you can be yourself. I mean, that's something, especially with social media these days, that's become such a weird thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that one was. I was really happy with that, with the lyrics in that song, just because it was like, it was kind of around. I think I was just like in a Starbucks, like on a motorway services, and it's just one of those. It's one of those in a motorway services. It's just one of those places where you can have the absolute like most cynicism for everybody in the world, because you're just trying to go somewhere. You're just trying to get somewhere, but like you have to, as a person, eat and drink and like shit and piss.
Right,
so like
right.
like the service station stop is so interesting to me, because you have to go there. You don't want to necessarily.
It's such a reluctant thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like everybody in there is like, I have to be here. Like I didn't drive here to come here to enjoy this place. And that's so like every like, just observing people in that atmosphere, you can really see people just as they are. Do you know what I mean? Because they're just because they go places. So comparing that atmosphere to like a Starbucks in a city centre somewhere, something that was really stark to me. It was just like, man, people are just like acting all the time. Do you know what I mean? And so it was like, that kind of identification of that whole thing was just playing on the idea that society as a whole, wherever you look on social media or anything like that, is constantly like telling you to like be yourself, enjoy everything that you need to enjoy, and all that sort of thing. But only in the right way. There's like this undercurrent, this like kind of like dark undercurrent, which is like be yourself, but only the self
within these defined parameters.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like the idea of like Christianity. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you have to be like pure and like beautiful, but if you do anything wrong, you can just like Hail Mary and it's all fine. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's just like there's this kind of like secret rule underneath, which is like kind of the inverse of that, which is like, be yourself, be 100% whatever you need to be, but make sure it's the right self. Do you know what I mean? Because if it's the wrong self, then you'll be immediately expelled. Because you look at anyone who's truly themselves, and they're either just characterized as being mental, like
sure, yes,
or they just fall off the fringes of society because they're just considered to be too crazy. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's kind of what that's all about. But like, again, like that's the thing for me, is that I had never, before speaking to you, never conceived those ideas or thought about what that actually meant, because there was just a conversation that I was having with myself that was entirely honest, and that was just writing it down and just being honest. So I think songwriting has more weight and effect when you're not thinking about like, oh, is this poignant? Do you know what I mean? So I think that's really cool. So thank you for bringing that up.
One thing I find interesting with what you say then is, do your bandmates ask you what songs are about?
Not really.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether they. I hope that it just comes across,
right?
Not really. But I think I like after 20 minutes of them not asking, the ego in me is like,
hey, listen.
I need love, like I need it. So I think I end up explaining it. But I like to think, hopefully, that they're kind of semi-self-explanatory, maybe.
Well, one thing I find interesting about what you mentioned kind of is did you encounter a lot of people trying to kind of do a similar thing with the band, saying, well, be yourself, but I don't know, because I hear a lot of strange things about the music industry of third-party people trying to tell or give hints on where to go. So did you encounter some of that? Kind of people
Yeah, I think that was I encountered a lot of that in the last band that I was in previous bands, and like the last band that I was in, we had like a shot at being in the music industry, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of what influenced the startup of this band. Really, was because I was a bassist, typically a musician in the band who was always kind of stifled and told just to play bass. And I felt like there was like a lack of self-expression, and everybody in the beginning there was this real authentic thing that was happening. We were all playing together, and it was already great. And then suddenly along the way, it kind of shifted to this thing where we were writing and creating for the industry, you know? And I think, but that's the kind of like cynicism of the whole thing, and the darkness of the whole thing, is that you don't really realize that that's happening. It's done in such subtle ways and such like subtle shifts and changes. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like a kind of like Facebook algorithm. It's just very, 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 very delicately like coursing you to this one final destination. Do you know what I mean? And at that point, you kind of see people behaving like they're not themselves, like they shouldn't be. And I'm still friends with all these people that I was in bands with before and stuff like that. And now it's great to see that people are like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I'm myself now, because there's not that kind of like, again, that like dark hand kind of like pulling the strings and stuff like that. So it's like, it sounds a bit conspiracy theorist to kind of like talk about that thing like in the industry, but it truly is there because there's a framework for people to fit into and stuff.
Well, that's the thing, and I like I mean, I've been doing this job quite a while, and I like talking about that kind of dichotomy between the very emotional creative side on the one end and the very harsh businessy side on the other, which doesn't really mesh, you know. But there's one line in I wrote down another line in What Is Hate.
Oh yeah.
Because you kind of question hate, faith, fear, greed, and there's a line, "Can't you feel the love in the world?" So is that for you? Is that an optimistic song?
Yeah, I think that one was really that one kind of just started from the point of just trying to make the words rhyme. Do you know what I mean? Which is really cool. You know what I mean? Like, and just having fun with the idea of making the words rhyme. But the idea more generally was to take the idea of like asking these questions about like higher concepts, and then in each chorus kind of asking the person who felt these feelings or had experienced these concepts unconditionally, like hate and fear and faith, can't, like, taking it down to this really like singular space. So can't you feel love in the room? And then like each chorus taking it out to like a broader thing and saying like, look, if you can't, you know, if you can feel the love in this room, then it's completely natural and completely obvious for you to be able to feel love for the entire world. You know what I mean? It's like there should be no in between. Either you hate this room and you hate the world, or you love this room and you love the world. Do you know what I mean? So it was kind of about that. But I think moreover, I think that one was just having fun with kind of like words like what is hate, served on a plate, fearless behavior, fascist dictator, and all that sort of stuff. So it was like that was more of like a kind of Beatlesy thing. But it was good to. I think rarely. I think that was the only way that I could sort of attack those ideas. Like was by just having like a super fun approach, because otherwise it would be like really too dark and like dingy and like be talking about like what is the concept of hate. That's like that just sounds like something I don't want to listen to. Do you know what I mean? Just like
it sounds like a very dry academic paper.
Yeah, exactly. Just get off your pedestal. You and just come and just please stop it. So it was, so it's quite good to approach it in that fun way and just be, and kind of have like a lighthearted approach to being like, it was kind of just like a letter written to people who kind of like unconditionally hate, but they don't really know that it's like, come on, man, can't you feel the love in the room, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
And I like that you explain it like this, because is that true then for the music as well? Because I read that in Sugarloaf Mountain, you kind of intentionally wanted the guitars to sound a certain way and to kind of make a certain atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly. It was like that was like a similar approach. I think I have like a similar approach to all the songs in terms of like the what is hate thing, is that like you've got to approach everything kind of with a sense of humor to make the more profound stuff feel a bit more profound. And that was the similar thing with like the guitars and stuff in the early parts of Sugarloaf Mountain, Crucify Me. It's just like I didn't want the like I wanted the guitar to sound a bit shit, basically, to kind of just remove this element of like, I'm one person and a guitar, like preaching to you about my life. Like, you don't care. You know what I mean? Like, we've just, like, we're a new band, you know, if I was like, you know, if we were a huge band, if like, God forbid, we were the size of Bastille or something, do you know what I mean?
Right.
And it was like, I was writing a song with just me and a guitar. Some people might care, but at this point, I don't think people care. So it's like, those little moves by me are like intentional to try and remove that level of like poignancy or anything like that, to kind of just like help people relax and just make it feel like it's not just me being like, listen to me, sort of thing.
Right.
So the guitars was a bit shit in the beginning, just to remove that, just kind of like disengage people from that idea. But I love that song primarily because that song was like the culmination of, and that's kind of why it comes at the end as well, was like a culmination of all those ideas that had been collected, honesty and stuff like that. And during the process of writing this EP was like, okay, I have never written a fully honest song about my life and my relationships within my like closest circle of people, because I've always found that really terrifying, like actually admitting my feelings. Sure. Christ, are you crazy? So it was like so that was a really good culmination of that point, to be like, okay, I can do this, I can be a human being. And did it. So that song is like a culmination of all those ideas.
In that case, and I'll ask you about one line, because I thought it was an interesting line in that song. Part of this life feels like a well-constructed lie.
Yeah.
Where did that line come from?
Well, it's just kind of like, I think it was like I kind of approached the point where I was like really terrified of dying, which is, I'm pretty sure, is like by and large a huge thing. Except, like, this is the beautiful thing about the fear of death, is that people who intellectuals would perceive to be maybe uneducated or perhaps simple, not by my estimation, but by the estimation of intellectuals. Like, I grew up in Barry, which is a largely working class town. Like all of my friends and their fathers and their mothers and their parents seem to not have this fear of death at all. Just like, oh, you know, it's going to come to me, so like, why would I worry about it? Which I think is one of the most beautiful things ever. Like, you got all these intellectual people who are like, and then people who take themselves way too seriously, who were so terrified of this like idea of death, when in actual fact they should be learning lessons for once from the people who, you know, prop up the economy and all that sort of thing. But beyond that, being one of those foolish middle class pseudo intellectuals who's terrified of dying, I was kind of like, well, I don't want to die, but at this point in time, life just seemingly, all the constructs and everything that is made up to prop up the society that we live in, seems like just like a perfectly constructed idea, almost Matrix-like, to convince you that life is fabulous and that you don't want to die. So it's like the whole thing is like, part of this life feels like a well-constructed lie, and I hate that, but I don't want to die. So I kind of, it's just like it's like putting you in between these two concepts. It's like, you get, you know, you have to live in this whole like fake idea of life and just submit yourself to the idea that you're never going to understand it. And there's probably a couple of people who do understand it, and they're going to write the rules. Or you can die, and it's a really stark like decision to be made, that has been built up over all this time. And so it's kind of just submitting myself to the idea of just like, okay, I'll just have to exist in the middle and just bumble along like everybody else. So it's kind of just like taking me from this position of pseudo-intellectual, like, I'm discussing the big topics, to like, actually, nobody knows anything. Come on, just fucking join us and just relax, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
But that's interesting, because what you mentioned about kind of post-university, that's kind of how I felt after university, that you had all this intellectual input, but then you look at people who don't bother with philosophy or whatever, and they seem to be a lot more happy than I am. So I'm
exactly.
What's going wrong here?
And I think the mistake that a lot of people make is that a lot of people would say, it's like, oh, well, they're not actually questioning anything. You know, like, that's the thing, is that they're not actually asking the questions. And in actual fact, they are, and they're asking really questions on a daily basis. But they have a perception that, like, you know, there's not this sense of deservedness, if that's a word. I don't even know if that's a word, but like a sense of like, oh, like, I have put in this certain amount of intellectual effort, so thus I deserve to not be afraid of death. It's nothing to do with, like, living in very practical terms is a really fulfilling thing. And that's why I just think like people who work in practical terms are just absolutely fabulous and like wonderful people, and people that you can make the most like intimate connections with. Which is why, everybody finds the, I'm sure, I don't know if you study philosophy, but everybody finds the philosophy major at the bar of a really expensive hotel at 3 a.m. talking
about morality or
yeah. It's just like insufferable. It's just like, I don't care. At the end of the day, we all want to get fucking drunk and just like, submit ourselves to these like awful pleasures. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, so I think that's it, and I think so. It's just analyzing that kind of like the dichotomy, like you said, between like finishing uni, believing that you've achieved something intellectually higher, even though at this point in time in our society it absolutely means nothing.
Exactly.
But coming to that realization is like, oh, actually, I've been telling myself a lie for all this time that I am like intellectually superior to all these people. And in actual fact, I'm terrified to live, because I'm terrified of death. Do you know what I mean? So that is just that whole thing.
I will admit I'm getting better as I'm no longer in university. I'm getting a lot better with that. It helps a lot just to see the world for what it is in a way, instead of all these theoretical terms.
Yeah, exactly. Me too, man. And just connecting with like people just on a very like visceral and like practical and real level. I think helps you come to terms with the idea that everything's going to be, if you worm food, which is fine.
Well, in terms of death, I don't know if you know who this guy is. It's a little bit hippie-ish, but Alan Watts, he's this Zen. He kind of made Zen philosophy popular in the Western world. He kind of brought it from Eastern philosophies, kind of made it applicable or made it sensible over here in the 50s and 60s. And he has this really interesting thought about death. So if you're interested in that, I'd check that out. But there's one kind of to round off then, because you mentioned ambition. You say, well, we're not playing stadiums just yet. But is that in a way the ambition?
I'd love to. I mean, I'd love that to be the thing. Like, I think I feel way less nervous playing to like really large crowds than to playing like semi-intimate crowds.
Okay.
So I mean, that's one benefit, and also we get to play to more people. But yeah, I'd love to, but I think even if we were at that level, I'd love to still just be playing club shows, just because I think the connection that you can have. The one thing that I really don't like is we've played bigger shows, like we played in like Cardiff Castle, and it was like obviously that's like a huge capacity or whatever. You can't really look people in the eyes, and like I really love disengaging people with that sort of thing. It's just like when doing the whole dancing thing, just looking at one person. I just love that idea, and it like really calms me down to know that there's like somebody engaging with music, and I'm engaging with somebody. Where usually in the case with larger shows, there's people, it's less with larger shows. I feel like it's less of like you're going to see a band. It's more of like a day out sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? So you're there for the whole experience of being surrounded by people and like so that whole thing. I'd love to play stadiums just for the pyrotechnics personally, but I think club shows are fine. I'm happy existing, to be honest, for the rest of my life at the level that we're at now, because we have like a really dedicated fan base, which is amazing. I get to have conversations about myself with people like you. I get to talk about myself for like 20 minutes, which is insane. So I mean, I think this is really good for my ego. So if I can do this till the day I die, I'll be a happy man.
On those words, thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Thank you so much, man. It's been really cool speaking to you.
Yeah, likewise.